Every man you date will disappear, he warned, until you realize you're mine. The key to apartment 3, Bea felt cold in Lena Carver's hand. It was a plain, old-fashioned brass key, its teeth worn smooth in places, and it represented the single most terrifying and exhilarating decision she had ever made. She had left everything. She had packed 2 suitcases, drained her joint savings account of the $4,000 she had meticulously proven was hers, and driven 11 hours north to the fictional city of Raventon. She had quit her job. She had left a note. She had blocked Kyle's number, his email, and every social media profile he might use to contact her. The apartment was small, a 3rd-floor walk-up in a downtown building of faded brick and dark green trim. It smelled of steam heat, floor wax, and the faint, dusty sweetness of the bakery on the ground floor. It was blissfully, beautifully empty. There were no heavy, masculine footsteps on the hardwood. No tense silence that meant she had bought the wrong brand of coffee. No quiet, cutting remarks about the way she dressed, the way she laughed, or the clients she chose. For the first 3 days, Lena did almost nothing. She bought an air mattress, a kettle, and a bag of coffee. She sat on the floor of her new living room, sipping from a ceramic mug, and watched the gray Raventon light shift across the bare walls. She was 26 years old, and for the first time since college, she felt the terrifying, electric potential of a blank page. Her new life began to take shape, slowly, like a watercolor finding its edges. She was a freelance graphic designer, and a good one. She unpacked her laptop and her drawing tablet, setting up a small workstation by the tall window that overlooked the street. She emailed her old contacts, updated her portfolio, and within a week, she had landed a small contract designing logos for a new restaurant. It was not much, but it was hers. She kept to herself, finding a strange comfort in the anonymity of the city. She learned the streets, the rhythm of the delivery trucks in the morning and the quiet murmur of the bars at night. She was rebuilding her confidence piece by piece, like restoring a damaged sketch. Each day she went without looking over her shoulder, without flinching at a raised voice, was a victory. About 2 weeks after her arrival, she stopped at a coffee shop called the Daily Steep. It was raining, a miserable, bone-chilling drizzle that defined Raventon in early autumn. Lena was juggling her large black portfolio, an umbrella that refused to close properly, and a piping hot latte. As she fumbled for the door, the portfolio slipped, spilling a cascade of her best charcoal sketches onto the damp, tiled floor. "Oh, no," she breathed, dropping to her knees, frantic as the wet footprints of other patrons threatened to ruin weeks of work. A shadow fell over her. "Allow me." The voice was deep, smooth, and possessed an authority that made the noisy cafe seem to go silent. A man was crouching in front of her. He was not just tall, he was commanding, built with a solidness that seemed to absorb the light in the room. He was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit, the kind Lena had only ever seen in magazines, with no visible brand, which somehow made it look even more expensive. He began gathering her sketches. His movements were precise, economical. His hands were large, with clean, short nails, and they handled the delicate paper with a surprising gentleness. "Thank you," Lena stammered, her cheeks hot with embarrassment. "Thank you so much. They're for a potential client." He did not reply immediately. He stacked the last 2 sketches, his gaze fixed on a charcoal portrait of an old man's face. When he finally looked up, Lena felt the air leave her lungs. His eyes were piercing, a dark, indeterminate color that seemed almost black in the dim light. They were not unkind, but they were heavy, assessing her with an intensity that went beyond simple politeness. He held her gaze for a beat too long, a moment that stretched from casual courtesy into something intimate and unsettling. He handed the stack to her, his fingers brushing hers. His skin was warm, a stark contrast to the cold rain clinging to her jacket. Lena scrambled to her feet, clutching the portfolio to her chest. "I really appreciate this. Be more careful," he said. It was not a scolding, but a statement of fact. He stood, towering over her. And then, Without another word, he turned, retrieved a black coat from the back of a chair, and walked out into the rain. He did not look back. Lena stood frozen, her heart hammering a strange, heavy rhythm. They had not even exchanged names. That night, she was double-checking the locks on her apartment door when she noticed it. Across the street, parked directly under a flickering street lamp, was a large, black SUV. It was the kind favored by government officials or celebrities, with windows so darkly tinted they looked like polished obsidian. She frowned, pulling the curtains slightly. The vehicle was running, a faint plume of exhaust puffed from the tailpipe. It was just sitting there, engine idling, occupying a space that was usually empty at this hour. A prickle of unease, a learned response from her years with Kyle, crawled up her spine. He used to do that. He used to wait in his car outside her friend's house, just a reminder he was watching. But this was Raventon. Kyle was 11 hours away. He did not even know where she lived. She watched it for 20 minutes, her cup of tea growing cold in her hands. It was probably just someone waiting for a passenger in the next building. She was being paranoid. She was free now, she reminded herself. She had to stop seeing threats in every shadow. She closed the curtain, turned off the lights, and willed herself to sleep, dismissing the vehicle as a coincidence. A few days later, deciding she needed to force herself to be social, Lena went to a local tavern a few blocks from her apartment. The bartender was a man around her age named Cole. He had an easy, genuine smile, sandy brown hair that always seemed to be falling into his eyes, and a laugh that filled the noisy room. He was the complete opposite of the man in the coffee shop. Cole was sunlight. The other man was a moonless night. They talked for an hour. He complimented the small, intricate tattoo of a willow tree on her forearm. She told him she was a designer. He told her he was saving up to open his own microbrewery. It was simple. It was honest. He asked for her number. "I'm off on Tuesday," he said, wiping down the bar. "I know this great, non-fancy pizza place. You interested?" For the first time, she felt a spark of simple, uncomplicated hope. Their date was exactly what she needed. The pizza was greasy, the beer was cold, and the conversation flowed easily. Cole walked her home, and under the dim light of her apartment lobby, he gave her a chaste, sweet kiss on the cheek. "I had a really good time, Lena," he said, and she knew he meant it. "Me too, Cole." She went upstairs feeling light, floating on the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could have a normal life here. The text came the next afternoon. "Hey Lena, something crazy came up with my family back home. I have to leave town for a while. Like, right now. I'm so sorry. I'll call when I can." Lena stared at the message, a knot forming in her stomach. It felt abrupt. She texted back, "Oh no, is everything okay? Let me know if you need anything." No reply. That evening, she tried calling him. The call went straight to voicemail, not even ringing once, as if his phone was turned off or disconnected. She tried again the next day. Same result. She stopped by the tavern, and the other bartender, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, said Cole had called in that morning, said he had a family emergency, and quit on the spot. "Just upped and vanished," the woman said, shaking her head. "Left me completely screwed for the weekend. Men." Lena left, the cold dread solidifying in her gut. It felt wrong. People did not just disappear. Not like that. Not after a date that had felt so promising. She told herself it was a coincidence, a bizarre, unfortunate coincidence. But the unease lingered, a sour taste in her mouth. It was almost a week later when her new life and the shadows of her new city collided. Lena had been invited to display some of her sketches at a small, independent gallery opening. It was a modest affair, wine served in plastic cups and cheese cubes sweating on a platter, but it was a chance to network. She was standing near her portraits, nervously smoothing the fabric of her simple black dress, when she felt it, a change in the atmosphere. The cheerful chatter of the room seemed to dim, the energy shifting, as if a magnet had just been dropped into the center of the crowd. He was standing in the doorway, the man from the coffee shop. He was not looking at the art on the walls. He was looking at her. He wore the same kind of dark suit, though this one seemed even finer, charcoal gray with a subtle texture. He moved through the small crowd with an unhurried, predatory grace, and people instinctively stepped aside, sensing the aura of power that clung to him like expensive cologne. He stopped directly in front of her display. His eyes scanned her work, lingering again on the portrait of the old man. "You," he said. His voice was just as she remembered it, low and resonant. "You're the woman from the coffee shop," Lena said, her voice tighter than she intended. "Dante Morelli," he said, extending a hand. It was not a question, it was an introduction. She took it. His grip was firm, his palm warm and dry. It enveloped her smaller hand completely. "Lena Carver, your work has weight," he said, his eyes finally moving from the sketch to her face. "I find that rare. Thank you, Mr. Morelli. Dante," he corrected her. Though it did not sound like an invitation to familiarity, it sounded like an instruction. "I am in need of a portrait, a private commission. I would like you to do it." Lena was stunned. This was the kind of high-paying commission that could secure her apartment for a year. Yes, of course. I'd be happy to discuss the details. My rates are on my business card." He waved a hand, a dismissive gesture that brushed aside the concept of rates. "I will pay whatever you require. I want you to start tomorrow. Here, after the gallery closes." It was a command, not a request. Lena, still remembering the sting of Kyle's controlling demands, bristled. "I'll have to check my schedule. Mr. Morelli." His lips tilted in the barest hint of a smile, though it did not touch his eyes. "You will be available? 10 o'clock. He turned and left, just as abruptly as he had in the coffee shop, leaving Lena breathless and furious and holding a very lucrative, very strange commission. The next night, she was terrified, but she was also a professional, and she needed the money. She arrived at the gallery at 9:45. The owner let her in, his eyes wide with a strange mix of awe and fear. "Dante Morelli," the owner had whispered. "Lena, do you know who that is?" She had shaken her head. "He and his family, they basically own half of Raventon's historic district. Be careful." Dante arrived at 10 o'clock precisely. He wore a simple black sweater, which somehow looked more intimidating on him than the suit. He brought with him a heavy wooden stool. "I will sit here," he said, placing it in the center of the room, where the light was best. "Begin." For 2 hours, Lena sketched, the silence in the gallery was absolute, broken only by the scrape of her charcoal against the heavy paper. His presence was overwhelming. He did not move. He did not fidget or cough or check a phone. He simply sat, his gaze fixed on her. It was not a sexual gaze, but it was possessive, and it made her skin crawl even as it made her fingers tremble. She tried to make small talk, to ease the tension. "Do you work near here, Dante?" "I own this building," he replied, his voice flat. "Oh, well, the lighting is very good. I know." She focused on her work, on the hard line of his jaw, the straight bridge of his nose, the deep-set eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets, all of them dangerous. She was nervous, but she was also intrigued. He was, without question, the most compelling subject she had ever drawn. At midnight, she finally set the charcoal down, flexing her cramped fingers. "I think that's enough for the first session. I've got the foundational lines." Dante did not move from the stool. He just watched her as she began to pack her supplies. "You went on a date," he said. Lena froze. Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly. "What?" "With the bartender, Cole." He said the name as if it tasted like ash. How do you know that?" Lena whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone. "Who are you?" "He's gone," Dante continued, his voice terrifyingly calm, as if discussing the weather. "He had to leave town. A family emergency." Lena's breath hitched. She backed away, her hip bumping the easel. That was you. What did you do to him?" "He was not right for you," Dante said, finally standing. He was a mountain of shadow in the dim gallery. "He was weak. He would have disappointed you." "You have no right!" Lena's voice cracked with fear and rage. "You're insane. You scared him off." I ensured your evening would not be complicated by false hope, he said, taking a step toward her. Lena grabbed her bag, her portfolio. Stay away from me. I don't know who you think you are, but you are sick. You're a stalker. She made it to the door, her hand fumbling with the deadbolt. Lena! His voice was quiet, but it stopped her cold. She turned, her back pressed against the heavy glass door, the streetlights of Raventon creating a halo around his dark shape. He had not moved. He stood by the stool, his hands clasped behind his back. Every man you date will disappear, he stated, his voice a blade of cold steel, sharp and absolute. Every friend you make, every man who looks at you for too long, they will have family emergencies, they will move away, they will have accidents. He took one step closer. She could see his eyes now, devoid of all warmth, filled with a chilling, patient certainty. They will all vanish until you realize you're mine. Shock, cold and absolute, paralyzed her. This was not real. This was a nightmare. This was Kyle's manipulation magnified by 1,000, backed by a threat she could not even begin to understand. You're crazy, she breathed. She ripped the door open and stumbled out into the cold night air, her portfolio forgotten on the floor. She ran the 3 blocks to her apartment, not daring to look back, the sound of her own frantic footsteps echoing in the empty street. She slammed her door, threw the deadbolt, and slid to the floor, shaking. But as she sat there, the terror warring with disbelief, a small, insidious part of her consciousness registered something else. It was not just his words, but the way he had said them, not with the wild-eyed rage of a lunatic or the desperate pleading of a spurned lover. Dante Morelli had said it with the calm, unshakable confidence of a man stating a fact, and deep in her gut, buried beneath the fear, Lena felt the faintest, most terrifying flicker of a different emotion, something that felt disturbingly like protection. The air in the 4th precinct was stale, smelling of burnt coffee and damp wool. Lena sat on a hard plastic chair under a flickering fluorescent light, feeling her resolve crumble into humiliation. She had spent 20 minutes repeating Dante Morelli's words to an officer whose expression remained fixed in a mask of profound boredom. So, let me get this straight, miss, Officer de Mornay said, leaning back in his squeaking chair. This man, Dante Morelli, he didn't touch you. He didn't threaten to harm you physically. He didn't steal from you. He told me, Lena repeated, her voice sounding small and childish even to her own ears, that every man I date will disappear. And one already did. A man named Cole, he just vanished. De Mornay sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Ma'am, a man quitting his job after a family emergency isn't a crime, and another man saying something weird to you in a gallery isn't a crime either. It's Raventon. It's probably the strangest pickup line I've heard this week, but it's not a threat. He told me Cole was gone before I even knew his name. He's stalking me. That black SUV outside my building. Is it there now? Did you get a plate? Is it doing anything illegal? No, but listen, Miss Carver, the officer said, closing his notebook with a soft finality. You seem like a nice young woman, and you're new to the city. My advice? Stay away from him. If he actually does something, if he puts his hands on you or sends you a letter threatening your life, then you come back, and we'll file a report. We can't arrest a man for being intense. Lena walked out of the precinct, the gray afternoon light feeling like a slap. She felt exactly as she had when she tried to explain to her mother why Kyle's attentiveness made her skin crawl. She sounded insane. She was a woman crying wolf. While the wolf was patiently watching from the tree line, she was terrified, but a deeper, harder emotion was setting in. Anger. She would not be reduced to this. She would not be the trembling victim Kyle had tried to make her. She was Lena Carver. She had rebuilt her life once, and she would not let this ghost, this suited phantom, take it from her. She decided to fight back, not with confrontation, but with defiance. She would live. She would be so glaringly, boringly normal that his dark obsessions would have nothing to stick to. She forced herself out of her apartment, which now felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. She joined a local art group that met on Saturdays, sketching in the city's windswept parks. It was there, while trying to capture the lopsided angle of a park bench, that she met Nate. Nate Riley was everything Dante Morelli was not. He was of average height, with kind, crinkling blue eyes and a perpetually rumpled tweed jacket that smelled faintly of chalk dust and apples. He was a high school history teacher at Raventon High, and he was, by his own admission, a terrible artist. "I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be a squirrel," he said, pointing to his own sketchbook, "but it looks more like a small, very depressed bear." Lena laughed. It was a real laugh, one that started in her chest and surprised her. They talked for an hour. He spoke about his students with a passionate, earnest enthusiasm. He was open, simple, and treated her with an uncomplicated kindness that felt like a balm on a raw wound. He asked her out for coffee. She said yes. Coffee turned into dinner a few nights later. Dinner turned into a walk along the Raventon River, the city lights glittering on the black water. Nate was respectful, funny and warm. He did not crowd her. He did not ask probing questions about her past. He just existed, pleasantly, beside her, on their second date after a movie she could not remember. He walked her to her lobby. "I'm having a really, really good time. Lena," he said, his hands shoved nervously into his pockets, "and I'd very much like to kiss you, if that's okay." The politeness of it, the permission, almost made her cry. She nodded, a small, shy movement. He leaned in. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, and sweet. It tasted of popcorn and the cold night air. It was a kiss of possibilities, of a normal life, of park benches and teaching conferences. It was safe. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Good night, Lena." "Good night, Nate." She floated up to her apartment, locking the door and, for the first time, not immediately checking the street for the black SUV. She had a choice. She had a chance. The next morning, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it, smiling, expecting a text from Nate. It was not Nate. The caller ID was from Raventon General Hospital. Her blood turned to ice. She answered, "Is this Lena Carver? We are calling about a Mr. Nate Riley. He listed you as an emergency contact." The world tilted. She was at the hospital in 15 minutes, her clothes thrown on, her mind a blank wall of static. A nurse with a tired, kind face met her in the waiting room. "Mr. Riley was brought in about 2 hours ago," the nurse explained, her voice low. "A trucker found his car in a ditch off the county highway, about 20 miles outside of town. It was a single-vehicle crash." "Oh, God," Lena breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. Is he okay?" "He has significant head trauma and a few broken ribs. He's in a coma. Dear, the doctors are doing everything they can." Lena's knees buckled. A coma. She sank into a chair, the smell of antiseptic burning her nose. A police officer, this one looking far more alert than De Mornay, approached her. "Miss Carver, you were with him last night." "We went to a movie," Lena whispered, her voice shaking. "He dropped me home around 11. He lives in the opposite direction of the crash site," the officer said, frowning. "Did he mention going anywhere? A late-night drive?" "No, he wouldn't. He's a teacher. He's responsible." The officer sighed. "We're treating it as suspicious. The car seems to have been forced off the road. No skid marks, and his wallet and phone were missing." Lena stopped breathing. "Missing. We're thinking it was a robbery gone wrong." The officer continued. "Someone runs him off the road. He hits his head. They panic, take his valuables, and flee. We'll know more when he wakes up." If he wakes up. Lena left the hospital in a daze. It was not a robbery. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, what it was. It was a message. It was a promise kept. When she got back to her apartment, it was waiting for her. Propped against her door was a vase, not a box, but a heavy, crystal vase filled with an impossible of flowers. They were the exact same arrangement from the gallery. Deep red peonies, so dark they were almost black, and pure white lilies. There was no note. The terror of the last few weeks, The fear, the paranoia, evaporated, replaced by a sudden, scalding rage. He had not just scared this one away. He had hurt him. He had taken a kind, sweet man and broken him, all to prove a point. She did not cry. She did not call the police. She grabbed her bag, hailed a cab, and gave the driver the address from Dante's commission paperwork, the one in the opulent, gated community on the north side of the city. The cab driver dropped her at a set of 20-foot-high wrought iron gates, set into a stone wall that looked high enough to keep out an army. She marched to the intercom, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I am here to see Dante Morelli," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "Tell him Lena Carver is here." She expected a long wait, expected to be told to leave. The heavy gates swung open in less than 3 seconds. The mansion was an exercise in dark, imposing wealth. It was all old stone, dark wood, and vaulted ceilings, silent as a cathedral. A man in a suit, with a clear earpiece, led her wordlessly through a marble foyer and down a hall to a study. Dante was standing by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over a garden that was perfectly manicured even in the gloomy weather. He wore a simple, dark gray sweater and black trousers. He looked like a scholar, not a monster. He turned as she entered. His face was calm, unreadable. "You animal!" Lena screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "You nearly killed him. He's in a coma. Nate is in a coma, you bastard." She launched herself at him, her small fists beating uselessly against his chest. It was like hitting a statue. He did not even flinch. He simply took her wrists in his hands, his grip impossibly strong, holding her still. "He's alive," Dante said. His voice quiet. "No thanks to you. The wallet, the phone, the car. It was you. You did this." "I heard about the accident," he said, his eyes searching hers, his thumbs rubbing small circles on the inside of her wrists. "It was unfortunate. Unfortunate," she shrieked, trying to pull away. "You liar! You sent me the flowers. You knew." "I did not touch him," Dante said, his voice dropping to a low, cold register that cut through her hysteria. "You're lying." "I am not," he insisted, his grip tightening for a fraction of a second. "I gave an order for him to be discouraged, persuaded to leave you alone, just like the bartender." He paused, and a flicker of genuine annoyance crossed his features. "My men were too aggressive. They mistook a warning for a command. The robbery was their crude attempt to cover their incompetence." Lena stared at him, horrified. He was not denying it. He was complaining about the method. He's a teacher," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, leaving only a cold, hollow dread. "He's a good person, and you just had him removed." "He was a distraction," Dante said, his gaze softening as he looked at her pale, tear-streaked face. He let go of one of her wrists to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. She flinched, but he completed the motion. "No one hurts you anymore, Lena," he whispered, his voice laced with a possessive, terrifying sincerity. "Not your ex-boyfriend, not a new lover who will disappoint you, not even by accident. I will not allow it." She ripped herself from his grasp. "You are the one hurting me," she said, her voice raw. "Stay away from me. Stay away from everyone I know." She ran from the study, from the silent, opulent tomb of a house, and did not stop until she was on the main road, gasping for air, the cold rain mixing with her tears. 2 days later, the sky opened. A torrential storm blew in from the west, turning the Raventon streets into shallow rivers. Lena had taken a bus to an art supply warehouse in the next county, a desperate, futile attempt to feel normal, to pretend her life was still about paperweights and charcoal densities. The bus broke down. It shuddered to a halt on a desolate stretch of Route 16, with the old quarry on one side and miles of dark, windswept fields on the other. It was 7 o'clock at night. The driver announced the transmission was gone. They were stranded. Lena's phone was at 10%. She scrolled through her contacts. Her mother, who would panic, her old college roommate, 3 states away, the art group. Acquaintances, Nate. A blank spot in a hospital bed. She had no one. Except for the one number she had saved under "Do Not Answer" after the gallery. The number from his commission? Her thumb hovered over the screen. It was a choice. She could sit here, soaking wet, freezing, and wait for a tow truck that might take hours, all to protect her pride. Or she could make a deal with the devil who had caused all this, just to be warm. The wind howled, rattling the windows of the bus. She was so cold, she pressed call. It did not even ring once. He just answered, "Lena." He said her name as if he had been waiting for it. She choked back a sob. I'm stranded. My bus. It broke down on Route 16 by the old quarry. "Stay on the bus," he said, his voice all business. "Do not move." The line clicked. She waited. The rain was a deafening roar. She counted the seconds. She reached 387, just over 6 minutes, when a pair of headlights cut through the blackness. It was not the SUV. It was a low, black sedan, the kind of car that looked like it cost more than her college education. It pulled up alongside the bus, its engine a low, powerful growl. Dante got out. He was not wearing a jacket, just a black dress shirt and trousers, already soaked to the skin in the seconds it took him to cross the pavement. He wrenched the folding door of the bus open. It had been stuck for the driver, and his eyes found her instantly in the dim interior. He did not say a word. He just walked up the aisle, took off his suit jacket, and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of him. Soap, wool, and something metallic, like the rain itself. "Come," he said, pulling her to her feet. He guided her off the bus and into the passenger seat of his car. The door shut with a heavy, solid thud, sealing them in an envelope of silence and warmth. The heat was on full blast. "The roads back to the city are flooding," he said, his voice tight. He drove with an effortless, focused intensity, one hand on the wheel. "We won't make it back tonight." Where are we going?" she asked, her teeth chattering. "Somewhere safe." He pulled into an old roadside inn a few miles later, its neon vacancy sign flickering heroically against the storm. He parked, got out, and was back in 30 seconds, dangling a key. He came around and opened her door, shielding her with his own body as he hurried her inside. The room was dated but clean, with a small electric fireplace giving off a cheerful, orange glow. Lena stood dripping on the worn carpet, shaking uncontrollably, his heavy, wet jacket still clutched around her. He disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a stack of rough, clean towels. "Get out of those wet clothes," he ordered, not looking at her as he handed them over. He turned his back, pretending to be interested in the weak signal on the small television. Lena ducked into the bathroom, peeled off her soaked jeans and shirt, and scrubbed herself dry with the towels. She wrapped one around her torso and used his jacket to cover herself. Stepping back out, he had turned off the television. He had called the front desk, and a tray with 2 steaming mugs of tea was sitting on the table. He gestured to the fireplace. "Sit. You're still shaking." She sat on the floor, tucking her bare feet beneath her, and accepted the mug. The hot ceramic warmed her hands. He did not sit beside her. He sat in the armchair a few feet away, watching her, a silent guardian in a damp black shirt. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the howl of the storm outside and the quiet ticking of the electric fire. "Why?" Lena finally whispered, staring into the fake flames. "Why are you doing this? You were watching me, weren't you? You knew where I was." "I knew where you were," he confirmed, his voice low. "That's not an answer." "Why me? You ruined my life, and then you saved me from a bus. You hurt people, and then you bring me tea. I don't understand you." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The firelight carved shadows onto his face, making his eyes look like dark, endless pits. "I saw you in the coffee shop," he said, his voice rough. "You were disorganized, frightened. You looked like you were carrying the world, and it was 3 seconds from crushing you, but you were still fighting. So I'm a charity case? A project?" "No," he said, a strange, harsh emotion entering his voice. "You were seen by me." He stood, walking the few steps to crouch in front of her. He was too close, his presence taking all the air from the room. "I don't let what's mine be taken," he said. his gaze dropping to her mouth. The tension in the room was suffocating. It was the storm outside, and the storm inside. He was a monster. He was her protector. He was the most dangerous thing she had ever known, and he was the only thing that felt solid in the world. He leaned in, his movement agonizingly slow. He was giving her time to say no, to pull away, to scream. She was frozen. His lips met hers. It was not like Nate's kiss. It was not gentle or polite or safe. It was a kiss of possession, a brand. His lips were firm, devastatingly sure, and they moved against hers with a slow, restrained hunger that made her bones ache. He tasted of the storm, of power, of a deep, profound loneliness she recognized in herself. His hand came up, not to grab her, but to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone as he tilted her head. The kiss deepened, and it was everything. It was terrifying. It was a promise of drowning. It was too much. Lena shoved against his chest, breaking the contact, gasping for air. She scrambled backward until her back hit the wall. "I can't," she breathed, her voice trembling. "I can't. You destroy lives. You hurt people. You put a man in the hospital. I can't fall for someone like you. I won't." Dante remained where he was, crouched by the fire. His breathing was heavy. His eyes, burning with an intensity that seared her, never left her face. He had heard her words, but his expression made it clear he did not believe them. He did not smile. He just nodded. Once. A slow, patient acknowledgement. He would wait. The morning after the storm. Lena woke up alone. The in-room was bright with the flat, scrubbed clean light that follows a deluge. There was no sign of Dante except for a lingering indentation on the armchair and the faint, masculine scent of his soap on the towel she had used. He had paid for the room. He had left her a fresh, dry set of clothes on the chair, simple black sweats and a thick wool sweater, their tags discreetly removed. He had thought of everything, and that, somehow, was the most terrifying part. Lena took a bus back to Raventon, the drive silent and agonizingly slow. She felt branded. The kiss at the inn had not been a simple, human connection. It had been a claiming. It had settled under her skin, a slow burn of sensation and fear that she could not wash off. She tried to regain her footing by throwing herself into her work. She took on 3 new clients, designing websites with a frantic, focused energy, working until her eyes burned and her fingers ached. She needed to build her walls back up. She needed to remember that Dante Morelli was a threat, not a savior. He was the storm, not the shelter. But the memory of his restraint was as potent as the memory of his possession. He had stopped. He had seen her fear, and he had backed away, giving her the armchair while he took the floor, a dark shape guarding her sleep until the first light of dawn. She was resisting feelings. Yes, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with her bare hands. She needed to know. The gallery owner's whispers and the precinct's dismissal were not enough. She had to understand what she was truly up against. She had a friend from college, Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who worked as a paralegal for the district attorney's office back in her old state. Lena called her, framing her questions with a practiced, casual air. "Hey, Sar, this is a weird one," Lena began, pacing her small apartment. "I've got this new client in Raventon, very wealthy, very private. The name is Morelli, Dante Morelli. Does that mean anything to you? I know your office sometimes shares data." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was a full octave lower. "Lena, where are you right now?" "My apartment. Why? Are you safe? Is he there?" "No, I'm alone." "Sarah, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" "The Morellis," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "are not just wealthy. They are Raventon. And not in the Chamber of Commerce way. We're talking about the Morelli Syndicate. It's old world. It's deep. We've got files on them thick as a phone book that we've shared with the feds up there. Racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, disputes over territory. They're the real deal, Lena." Lena sank onto her air mattress, her stomach clenching. "The man I met, he seems more like a recluse. He's intense, but nothing. Sarah cut in. "Dante is the head. He took over from his uncle about 5 years ago. He's not the old school, flashy type. He's quiet, educated, brutal. They say he cleaned house, consolidated power. He's got blood on his hands. Lena, a lot of it. The police won't touch him because they can't. He's insulated by lawyers and a wall of silence. Whatever commission he gave you, it's not about art. It's about you. You need to get out of that city. Now." The call ended, but Lena stayed on the floor, the cold hardwood seeping into her skin. It was not a stalker. It was a kingpin. He was not just a controlling man. He was the head of a crime family, the disappearing bartender, the accident that had put Nate in a coma. It all snapped into a new, horrific focus. These were not the actions of a single, obsessed man. They were the casual, brutal exercises of power. She stopped answering her phone. She blocked Dante's number. She worked, ate, and slept in her small apartment, venturing out only for coffee and groceries, her head down, hoodie pulled low. The black SUV was still there. She knew it was. She had stopped looking for it, because she knew it would not stop looking for her. This new knowledge held her captive for weeks. She finished her freelance projects. She visited Nate in the hospital. He was still in a coma. His kind. Rumpled face now pale and still against the white pillow. She would sit by his bed and read, her voice a low, guilty whisper, feeling Dante's shadow in the sterile room. Then, the atmosphere in her neighborhood began to change. The bakery on her ground floor, run by a kind older couple, had its front windows smashed. They claimed it was teenagers, but they were not laughing. The coffee shop she frequented suddenly closed, a "for repairs" sign taped to the door. Rumors of a fire in the back room, a rival gang had come to Raventon. Lena overheard the gallery owner, Mr. Reese, on the phone, his voice thin and panicked. "What do you mean? They're not interested? We've paid the Morellis for protection for 20 years. No, this new crew, they're not reasonable. They want double." They were testing Dante's territory, and it seemed for the first time that the Morelli name was not the shield it used to be. Lena was at the gallery late one Tuesday, dropping off the final proofs for a catalog. Mr. Reese was nervously counting cash from the register, his hands shaking. "You should go." "Lena," he said, not looking at her. "It's not safe to be downtown this late." Before she could reply, the glass doors of the gallery exploded inward, showering the floor with tempered glass. 3 men in dark hoodies and ski masks stormed in, wielding aluminum bats. "Nobody move!" one shouted, his voice muffled. "Mister!" Reese grabbed Lena's arm, his nails digging into her skin, and dragged her toward the back office. "The panic button," he whimpered, shoving her inside the small, cluttered room and fumbling for the alarm under his desk. They huddled in the dark, the sounds from the gallery a sickening symphony of destruction. The crash of sculptures hitting the floor, the rip of canvases, the splintering of wood. Lena pressed her hands over her mouth, her body rigid with terror. This was not targeted. This was random, brutal chaos. This was the world Dante lived in, the world that had now spilled over onto her. It felt like hours. Then, a new sound. Shouts from the alley. A muffled thud, a heavy, final crash. Then, silence. Lena and Mr. Reese stayed frozen, hardly breathing. The silence was, if possible, more terrifying than the noise. A sharp, controlled knock sounded on the office door. "Lena!" Her heart stopped. It was not Dante's voice. It was deep, unfamiliar, but laced with the same authority. "Lena, we're with Dante. It's clear." "Mister." Reese let out a choked sob and stumbled to the door, his fingers fumbling with the lock. He pulled it open. 2 men in dark, immaculate suits stood in the hallway. The gallery behind them was destroyed, a wasteland of broken art and glass. One of the men looked at Lena, his eyes sweeping over her in a quick, assessing glance. "Are you harmed?" "No," she whispered, shaking. "The police are on their way. We're to take you home. Use the back." Now, miss," the second man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They flanked her, guiding her through the destroyed storeroom and into the dark alley behind the gallery. The air was cold, smelling of wet cardboard and garbage. "The car is just at the end of the street," the first man said. They were passing a narrow gap between the gallery and the next building, a space filled with overflowing dumpsters and black shadows. A hand shot out from the darkness. It clamped around Lena's arm, yanking her off her feet. A masked man, one of the attackers, left behind, dragged her into the shadows. "She's the one! Morelli's girl! Grab her!" Lena reacted on pure, animal instinct. She was not a victim, not again. She screamed and swung her heavy portfolio, the one filled with her proofs, with all her strength. The hard plastic corner connected with the man's temple. He grunted, his grip loosening for a split second. Fouet. It was all Dante's man needed. He moved with a speed that was not human. He was on the masked man, a sickening crack echoing in the narrow space as his fist connected with the man's jaw. The other man pushed Lena behind his own large body, a human shield, as he scanned the darkness, but Lena had been dragged against the rough brick wall. Her arm was on fire, a long, burning scrape from her elbow to her wrist. She had fallen, twisting her ankle, and a sharp, throbbing pain shot up her leg. "I'm okay," she gasped, pulling herself up, adrenaline making her voice high and thin. "I'm okay." The first man finished his work. The attacker was a motionless heap on the wet pavement. He checked the man's pulse, then stood, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. "This way." The ride to her apartment was silent. The man drove the black sedan with effortless precision, his eyes never leaving the road. Lena sat in the back, her entire body shaking, pressing a wad of tissues from her bag to her bleeding arm. He walked her to her apartment door. 3B. He took her key from her trembling hand, unlocked the deadbolt, and pushed the door open, scanning the small, dark apartment first. He then handed the key back. "He will be here," he said. And then he was gone. A ghost in a suit. She locked the door, leaning against it, her legs finally giving out. She slid to the floor, her breath coming in ragged, painful sobs. She was hurt. She was terrified. And she was, for the first time, completely, utterly alone. 20 minutes later, he came. She did not hear a knock. She heard the sound of a key in her lock. The deadbolt she had just thrown turned with a well-oiled click. Dante stood in her doorway, his long, dark wool coat still damp from the rain, his face a mask of stone. He saw her. She was still on the floor, huddled against the door, her knees drawn up. She was holding a faded blue dish towel to her arm, and it was dark with blood. Her cheek was scraped and bruised from the wall. Her face was streaked with tears and grime. His control, the ironclad composure she had come to expect, did not just crack, it shattered. His eyes, usually so dark and patient, blazed with a black, terrifying rage. His entire body tensed. He took one step into the room, his gaze fixed on the blood and his fist clenched at his side. He turned, as if to destroy the first thing he saw, and his fist shot out, aimed at her plaster wall. It stopped, a single millimeter from the wall. His knuckles were white, his arm shaking with the force of the restraint. The control, the fact that he could have destroyed the wall but chose not to, was more violent than any impact. "He touched you," Dante whispered. The voice was not his. It was a low, vibrating growl that seemed to come from the deepest part of his chest. He was shaking. She could see it. He was not just angry. He was terrified. He had built a fortress around her, and a stray arrow had found its mark. His protection had failed. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes closing for a brief second. When he opened them, the inferno was banked, replaced by a cold, hard focus. He walked past her, into her small bathroom. She heard the medicine cabinet open. He returned with her first aid kit, a plastic box with a red cross on it. He knelt in front of her, on the floor, his expensive coat forgotten. He was now at her level, a dark, powerful figure dwarfed by the small, cramped space. "Let me," he said. It was not a request, it was a command, but it was raw, and it was a plea. Lena, too exhausted to fight, too vulnerable to resist, simply nodded. His hands, the same hands that could stop a millimeter from a wall, were impossibly gentle. He took the bloody towel from her, his touch light, and examined the long, ragged scrape. His expression was grim. He worked in silence. He cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe, his touch careful, his large fingers precise. He did not wince at the blood, but his jaw was tight. He bandaged her arm, then his eyes moved to her face, his thumb gently, so gently, brushing the scrape on her cheek. "I am sorry, Lena." He breathed, and the sound of it, the raw apology, broke something in her. She was crying, silent tears of shock and fear and a confusing, overwhelming relief. He was the monster who had brought this world to her, and he was the only one who could make her feel safe from it. He finished wrapping her arm, but he did not move away. He stayed kneeling, his eyes locked on hers. "You are safe," he whispered, as if trying to convince himself as much as her. She looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, the faint lines of stress around his mouth. She looked at his lips, the same lips that had kissed her at the inn. She was so tired of being afraid. She leaned in. It was a movement of an inch, but it was all the invitation he needed. He met her, his mouth capturing hers. This kiss was not the slow burn of the inn. This was a collision. It was desperate, raw and aching. It was his rage at her being hurt and her terror of being alone, all melting into a single, frantic point of contact. His hands came up to frame her face, his fingers threading into her hair, holding her steady, as if she might disappear. His lips were not gentle. They were claiming, searching, parting hers with a possessive hunger that she met with her own. He kissed her, and it was the only thing in the world that was real. His hands moved from her face, down her neck, his thumbs tracing her collarbone. He kissed her jaw, the sensitive skin behind her ear. He pulled her to her feet, his body a solid wall of warmth against hers. His hands went to the hem of her sweater, his fingers brushing the bare skin of her stomach. His touch was electric, sending a shiver through her. He was undressing her, his movements slow, his eyes fixed on hers, seeking permission with every agonizingly slow motion. The cool air hit her skin, and her mind, fogged with adrenaline and passion, cleared for a second. This was too fast. This was too much. This was a choice she was not ready to make, not like this. As his hands moved to the button of her jeans, she placed her hand flat on his chest. His heart was a frantic, trapped bird, hammering against her palm. He froze instantly. Every muscle in his body went rigid. "Dante," she whispered, her voice shaking but finding its strength. "Don't take what I'm not ready to give." He stared at her. His eyes were dark pools, the desire warring with a respect she had not known he possessed. He looked at her hand on his chest, then back to her eyes. He had been so close to losing control, and her words were the anchor that pulled him back. He nodded. A sharp, pained movement. He pulled his hands away from her as if her skin had burned him. He took a step back, breathing heavily. He shed his long wool coat, letting it fall to the floor. Then he took off his suit jacket, tossing it on top. He was left in his dark shirt and trousers. He sat on her small sofa and pulled her down beside him. He did not try to kiss her again. He did not touch her skin. He simply reached for his jacket, the one he had worn at the inn, the one that still lay on her chair. He wrapped it around her shoulders, covering her, cocooning her in his scent and his warmth. He pulled her against his side, his arm a heavy, solid weight around her. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heart as it slowly returned to a normal rhythm. He held her all night, in the dark, silent apartment. She dozed, and every time a nightmare made her flinch, he was there. His voice would rumble against her ear, a low, constant promise. "You are safe. No one will touch you again. I swear it." He held her tighter. "Your safety. It matters more than what I want." When she woke in the gray light of dawn, she was alone on the sofa. His coat was still wrapped around her. The apartment was still, but it was not empty. His presence lingered. She touched her bandaged arm. She felt the conflict deep in her gut. She craved his touch, the terrifying, absolute safety she had felt when he held her. But she feared his world, the one that had left her bruised and bleeding in an alley. She was no longer just a spectator to his life. She was in it, and she was terrified of how much she wanted to stay. The stillness of her apartment had become a new kind of prison. After the night of the attack, Dante's presence was a palpable, invisible force. The black SUV was gone from the street, but she knew it was a tactical retreat, not an abandonment. He was giving her space, but the space itself felt curated, as if he were watching from a distance she simply could not see. She was safe. No one bothered her. The new window at the bakery was installed. The coffee shop remained closed. A silent, bruising peace had settled on her small corner of Raventon, and it was suffocating. Lena was furious. She was furious at the rival gang, at the men in suits, and most of all, she was furious at Dante. He had held her. He had promised her safety, but his safety came at the price of her life. He had wrapped her in his jacket, but locked her in a cage of his own making. She had to prove, if only to herself, that she was still her own person, that her choices mattered, that she could still touch the normal world he had so thoroughly contaminated. It was an act of pure defiance. She went online, to a dating app. It felt sterile, safe, and, most importantly, a world he could not possibly control. She swiped past faces. Looking for the antithesis of Dante Morelli, she found him. His name was Jonah. His profile picture showed him on a mountaintop, grinning, arms wide, a golden retriever at his feet. He was all sunlight, flannel, and scruffy, boyish charm. He was an outdoors enthusiast and a part-time carpenter. He was, in every conceivable way, normal. They matched. He messaged her immediately. His texts were funny, filled with bad puns and genuine questions. He wanted to know her favorite hiking trail, not what building she lived in. Their first date was coffee and a walk in the park. He was even better in person. He was funny, self-deprecating, and he listened, really listened. When she talked about her design work, he did not crowd her. He did not touch her, except for a light, friendly hand on her back as they navigated a crowd. He was precisely what she had been missing. He was Nate, but without the tragic ending, their second date. He took her on a hike, just outside the city. They sat on a boulder overlooking a valley, sharing a bag of trail mix. "You're different," he said, tossing a peanut to a chipmunk. "Different how?" Lena asked, pulling her jacket tighter. "I don't know, you're jumpy, but you're also tough. Like you're braced for something." He laughed, a bright, easy sound. "Does Raventon make you nervous, or is it me?" "No, not at all." She lied, forcing a smile. "Just getting used to a new city." "Anyone ever give you trouble?" he asked, his gaze casual as he watched the valley. The question was a stone in her stomach. "No. Why would you ask that?" He shrugged, turning his easy grin on her. "No reason. You're just a really beautiful woman. Sometimes guys can be persistent. You just seem like you've dealt with the persistent kind." She brushed it off, but the question lingered. The third date, the illusion cracked. He took her to a loud, crowded bar, a place she immediately hated. He was not the same easygoing man. He was tense, his eyes darting to the door every time it opened. He drank his beers too fast. "So," he said, leaning in, his voice suddenly hard over the music. "I've seen it, you know." "Seen what?" Lena asked, her skin beginning to prickle. "The car. The black SUV, the one that used to sit on your street. Who is he?" Lena's blood went cold. She had never mentioned the SUV. She had never mentioned anything. I don't know what you're talking about, Jonah. Don't lie to me," he snapped, his hand slamming the table. The glasses jumped. "Everyone in this damn city knows about Morelli, and they know he's got some new girl, the one at the gallery, the one he shut the city down for. That's you, isn't it?" His face, once so sunny, was dark with a paranoid, controlling rage that was sickeningly familiar. He was Kyle. He was a different, more volatile version of Kyle. "I'm leaving," Lena said, grabbing her purse, her voice shaking. "You're drunk." "No, I'm not drunk," he said, grabbing her wrist. His grip was tight, his carpenter's hands like a vice. "I just need to know what he's paying you. Or is it a threat? Are you with him? Let go of me." She ripped her arm from his grasp, shoving her way through the crowd, and burst out onto the street. She was done. Done with men. Done with this city. Done with this invisible war. She spent the next day in her apartment, chain-smoking, trying to figure out her next move. She had to leave Raventon. Jonah texted her. "I'm so sorry. I was an idiot. I drank too much. I'm embarrassed. Please, just let me apologize in person. 5 minutes, the park by your old coffee shop. I'll be there at 7. If you don't come, I'll understand." She should not have gone. Every instinct screamed at her to lock the door, pack her bags, and call a cab to the bus station. But the plea, the manufactured vulnerability, it had worked on her before. She went, not to forgive him, but to tell him, face to face, to leave her alone. The park was empty, shrouded in the blue light of dusk. He was sitting on a bench, head in his hands. He looked broken. "Jonah," she said, her voice hard, staying a safe 10 feet away. He looked up. His face was not sad. It was cold. "Lena, glad you could make it." A white van, the kind used by contractors, pulled onto the curb behind her, its headlights off. 2 men got out. "It was just bait," Jonah said, standing up. "He was not a carpenter. He was not outdoorsy. He was a liar. And you took it. Hook, line, and sinker." "Jonah, what is this?" "He's not Jonah," a new voice said. A man stepped out of the van. He was older, with a pockmarked face and dead, gray eyes. "Jonah was the name on the dating profile. His name is irrelevant, and so, almost is yours." Lena turned to run, but they were on her. A hand clamped over her mouth, an arm of solid muscle wrapped around her waist, lifting her off the ground. She kicked and fought, but the men were professionals. A cloth, smelling of chemicals and almonds, was pressed over her nose. Her world dissolved into a spinning, black void. She woke to the smell of rust and decay. She was in a chair, her wrists and ankles tied tightly with zip cuffs that cut into her skin. The room was vast, dark and cold, an abandoned building, a warehouse, judging by the high, broken windows and the massive, silent machinery draped in tarps. "She's awake," Jonah's voice said. He was standing by a work table, cleaning his nails with a knife. The pockmarked man stepped out of the shadows. He was the leader, the rival. "Good. Now we can begin." "What do you want?" Lena's voice was a dry croak. Her head was pounding. "Want?" He chuckled, a sound like gravel. "We want what's his. We want his territory, his roots, his money, but Dante Morelli. He's a ghost. He's careful. He's insulated. Until you." "Me? I'm no one." "You're his weakness," the man said, pacing in front of her. "We've been watching you for weeks. We saw the attack on the gallery. We saw his men pull you out. We saw him go to your apartment. He broke his own rules. For you, a man who has no weaknesses, suddenly has one, and it's all we need." Jonah held up her phone. "We're going to call him. You're going to be the bait that finally brings the monster out of his cave." "He won't come," Lena whispered. A desperate, hopeless lie. "Oh, he'll come," the man said, smiling. He took the phone from Jonah, dialed Dante's number, her do not answer, and put it on speaker. It rang once. "Lena," Dante's voice said, not a question, a statement, not quite. The pockmarked man said, "This is a friend of a friend. I have something of yours, a little designer. She's here at the old shipping yard off Covenant." A dead, heavy silence. Lena could hear Dante breathing, a slow, controlled intake of air. "If you have harmed her..." The voice was a low vibration of pure, compressed violence. "She's fine, for now, and she will stay that way. If you follow the rules, you, for her, come alone. No guns, no men, just you. You have 20 minutes or she dies." The man hung up. He tossed her phone onto a nearby, dusty table. It landed screen up. The call ended. "Now, we wait," he said, turning to his men. "He'll come. He won't be able to stop himself." Lena's heart was a drum of pure terror, not for herself, for him. He was coming. He was coming alone. For her. The men were talking, arguing over who would get the first shot. They were not looking at her. They were looking at the door. Lena's eyes darted around the room. Her chair was 3 feet from the table. Her phone. It was on. The screen dark, but it was there. She was tied, but her chair was not secured. She began to move. It was an agonizingly slow process. She rocked the chair, a fraction of an inch at a time, scooting it closer to the table, the sound masked by the men's voices, inch, inch, inch. Her arm was screaming, the zip cuffs cutting deeper. She was finally close enough. She could not reach the phone, but maybe... She tensed her legs and kicked backward, slamming the chair into the table. The table shuddered. The men turned. "What was that?" "She's just scared," Jonah said. "Shut up!" But the phone, it had skidded. It was now at the very edge of the table, teetering. The men turned back to the door. Lena kicked again, a precise, desperate mule kick. The chair leg hit the table leg. The table jumped. The phone clattered to the concrete floor, landing at her feet. She held her breath. No one had noticed. Her hands were tied, but her feet were not. She fumbled with her shoe, her toe searching for the phone. It was screen up. She had been looking at a map earlier, trying to find a route out of Raventon. The map app was still in her recent history. She slid her toe over the glass. The screen lit up. The map, she knew his number. Do not answer. She could not dial it, but she could. She could send. With a desperate, clumsy movement, she pressed the share location icon. The contact list popped up. He was at the top. Do not answer. Her toe, trembling, pressed his name. She hit send. A tiny, blue, delivered message appeared under the pin. "He's here." The pockmarked man whispered. The massive, rolling steel door of the warehouse groaned. Sliding open a few feet, Dante stepped into the sliver of light. He was alone. He wore a simple black shirt and trousers, his hands raised, empty. He looked like a sacrifice. "I'm here," he said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Let her go." Jonah laughed, stepping into the light and pressing the cold barrel of a gun to Lena's temple. "Not so fast. Morelli, we want to talk about your retirement." "She has nothing to do with this," Dante said, his eyes finding Lena's. They were filled with a black, bottomless rage and a terrifying, aching tenderness. "She has everything to do with this," the pockmarked man said, stepping out, his own gun trained on Dante. "She's the string that makes the puppet dance." "And now, we cut the string." Dante's eyes flickered. It was a signal. "You were always sloppy, Markov," Dante said to the man. "You talk too much." "And you," Markov sneered, "you're a fool. You came for a girl. It's a trap." "No," Dante said, his voice dropping. "It's not." From outside, a new sound, not the growl of one car, but 5, the silent, powerful engines of his fleet. Headlights, dozens of them, flashed on, flooding the warehouse with blinding white light. Markov panicked. "It's a setup. Kill him. Kill her." Jonah's arm tensed. He aimed the gun at Lena's head. Dante moved. He was not a man. He was a panther, a shadow. He crossed the 20 feet of space in a blur, his body a projectile of pure, focused intent. He did not go for Jonah. He went for Lena. He slammed into her, chair and all, his body covering hers as they crashed to the concrete. The shot rang out, deafeningly loud. The bullet meant for her head singing through the air where she had been. It grazed Dante's back, a hot, searing tear of metal. He grunted, a sharp exhalation of pain, but his body only covered hers more completely. The warehouse erupted, the side doors burst open. Dante's men, the silent, suited ghosts, moved in. It was not a firefight. It was a methodical, brutal, and short-lived extermination. The sounds were clipped, professional and terrifying. In seconds, it was over. Silence, thick and heavy, filled the room. Lena was crushed under Dante's weight. He was a dead weight, too still. "Dante?" she whispered, her voice choked with dust. "Get him off her." A man ordered. Hands were on them, cutting her bonds. They rolled him off. She saw it then. The dark, wet patch on his black shirt, high on his shoulder, spreading. He was bleeding. He was bleeding for her. "Dante!" she screamed, scrambling to her knees. His eyes were open, but they were unfocused, glazed with pain. His men were already at his side, pressing a field dressing to the wound. "Lena," he breathed. His hand, covered in grime, fumbled for hers. "Safe. You're Safe. No, she sobbed, the tears streaming down her face, cutting clean paths through the dust. No, you... Stay awake. Do you hear me? We have to go, boss. Now, his man said. They were lifting him. A well-practiced, careful movement. He was loaded into the back of a black SUV. Lena did not wait for an invitation. She climbed in after him, kneeling on the floor, grabbing his hand. Don't you dare, she whispered, her voice fierce, pressing a fresh stack of gauze to the wound as one of his men had shown her. The SUV sped off, melting into the night. Don't you dare close your eyes. Stay with me, Dante. Stay with me. They were racing through the dark streets of Raventon to a private doctor, a hidden clinic, a world she had never known. She held his hand, his grip still impossibly strong. Even as his head lolled against the seat, she looked at their joined hands, hers, small and trembling, covered in his blood. His large and strong, now dependent on her. This was not the feeling of a captive. This was not the terror of a prisoner. He had come for her. He had traded himself for her. He had taken a bullet for her. She was no longer his captive. She was his, and as the SUV careered through the darkness, the thought, for the first time, did not feel like a cage. It felt like an anchor in the storm. Lena's apartment was a memory. The black sedan had delivered them not to a sterile clinic, but to the gates of his mansion, a fortress of old stone and silent. Watchful men, a doctor, a pale man with nervous hands, had met them in the marble foyer, and Lena was ushered away while he was taken to a room she did not know. She spent the first 24 hours in a guest suite larger than her entire apartment. It was furnished with antiques that looked too valuable to sit on, the air still and cold. She was not a prisoner. The door was unlocked, but she was not a guest. No one spoke to her. On the second day, she found him. He was not in a medical wing, but in his own bedroom, a vast, dark wood space dominated by a massive bed. He was awake, sitting on the edge of the mattress, his back to her. His right arm was in a sling, his left hand gripping the edge of the bed. The nervous doctor was trying to change the dressing on his shoulder, his hands shaking so badly he could barely peel the tape. "Get out!" Dante's voice was a low growl, tight with pain. "Both of you!" The doctor looked at Lena, his eyes wide with relief. "He needs the antiseptic." "I'll do it," Lena said. The words were out of her mouth before she could think about them. Dante did not turn. The doctor fled, leaving the first aid tray behind. Lena picked up the bottle of antiseptic and a clean cloth. She walked toward him, her heart a low, heavy drum. He was a lion, wounded, and she was walking into the cage. She stopped in front of him. He was pale, his jaw tight, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. "You don't have to," he said, not looking at her. "You're right," she said, her voice quiet. She set the tray on the nightstand. "Sit still." She moved behind him. The dressing was a mess, soaked through. She peeled it back gently. The wound was angry, a raw, stitched gash on the hard muscle of his back, high on his shoulder. It was the price for her life. As she cleaned the wound, her fingers brushing his hot skin, she saw them. His back was a map of his life. A long, thin, silvery scar ran from his shoulder blade down to his ribs. Another, a puckered circular mark, was low on his left side. There were others, small, white lines of healed violence. Her fingers traced the long, silver line. This one wasn't from a bullet. He tensed at her touch, a shiver running through him, but he did not pull away. "My father," he said, his voice rough, a lesson in obedience. "It was 5 years ago. He failed." She said nothing. She just cleaned the wound, her touch as gentle as she could make it. He was not just a monster. He was a man, built from the scar tissue of the monsters who had come before him. They fell into a strange, quiet rhythm in the isolation of the mansion. He was the most powerful man in Raventon, and he was, for now, trapped. He spent his days in his study, his arm in a sling, his voice a low, angry murmur on the phone as he governed his unseen empire. She spent her days exploring. The house was a museum, cold and perfect. But she started to find him in the quiet corners. One night, she woke to a sound. It was music, thin and solitary in the massive, silent house. She followed it, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. It led her to a vast library. He was there, sitting at a grand piano, the moonlight from the tall windows silvering his dark hair. He was playing, his left hand, his good hand, moving across the keys, picking out a melody that was heartbreakingly sad. He played with a profound, aching skill. She must have made a sound, a small intake of breath. He stopped. His hand fell from the keys, and he turned. The boss was gone. In his place was a man, caught in a moment of private, unguarded vulnerability. "I didn't mean to—" She started. "It's fine," he said. Too quickly. He looked at the piano as if it had betrayed him. She walked closer, her eyes falling on a single, silver-framed photograph on top of the piano. It was the only personal item in the entire room. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, with Dante's dark, piercing eyes and a wild, defiant smile. "Who is she?" Lena asked. He did not answer for a long time. "My sister, Chiara. She's beautiful." "She's dead," he said, the words flat, devoid of emotion. "She was killed 15 years ago." He stood, his one good hand clenching and unclenching at his side. He walked to the window, his back to her. "My uncle, the man I took this from. He was in a dispute, a rival family. They wanted leverage. They took her from her school. They thought a show of force would bring him to the table." Lena's hand went to her mouth. "He didn't negotiate." Dante's voice was a whisper, a hollow, dead sound in the dark room. "He retaliated. They sent her back. In pieces." Lena felt a sob, hot and acidic, rise in her throat. She understood. The kidnapping, his frantic, all-consuming need to find her, his rage. "They took her," he said, turning to face her, his eyes black holes in the moonlight. "Because my family was weak. Because my uncle was careless. He let them see what he loved. He showed them his weakness. He had just shown her his—" "You're not weak, Dante," she said, her voice trembling. You're alone. Aren't we all?" he said, a bitter, self-deprecating smile twisting his lips. "You, me. We're two people, trapped in a fortress. You by circumstance, me by my name. I was alone before I met you," she said, thinking of Kyle, of her empty apartment, of the life she had been running from. "My loneliness was quiet. Yours is loud. It's the only way to survive," he said. He looked at her, his gaze so intense it was a physical touch. "When I saw you in that warehouse, when I saw Jonah's gun at your head, I saw her, I saw Chiara, and I knew I would let them burn the entire world to the ground before I let them take you, too." That night, something shifted. The wall of fear she had built against him, the one he had honored since the inn. It did not just crumble, it evaporated. A few nights later, he was healed enough that the sling was gone, though he still favored his right side. He found her in the library, sketching the piano in her book. He was holding a bottle of wine, deep red, and 2 glasses. He did not say anything, he just poured, and handed one to her. They drank in silence, the quiet between them no longer empty, but full. It was full of shared loss, full of the ghosts of Chiara and Nate, full of their own profound, aching solitude. He set his glass down. "He played this," he said, his voice low. "The doctor, the nervous one, he plays the violin, his debt. I don't understand. He owed my family, a gambling problem. I cleared it, in exchange. He stays on retainer. He plays for me when the house is too quiet." He held out his good hand. "He's not here tonight." "Dante," she whispered, "dance with me. Lena." Her hand, small and trembling, fit perfectly in his. He drew her to her feet, his left hand finding the small of her back, pulling her against him. There was no music. There was only the sound of their breathing, the whisper of her clothes against his, the steady, solid beat of his heart under her ear as she rested her head on his chest. They slow danced in the moonlight, a man with a wounded shoulder and a woman with a wounded soul. His good arm held her as if she were made of spun glass. his touch a reverence. He kissed her forehead, his lips warm. "You're safe," he whispered. "I know," she whispered back, and it was true. He kissed her, his lips finding hers. It was not the possessive brand of the inn, or the desperate, frantic collision after the attack. This was new. This was slow, and deep, and sure. It was a kiss of profound, mutual need, of two solitudes finally touching. His restraint was a tangible thing. His hand moved from her back, tracing her jaw, his thumb stroking her bottom lip. It was a question. She answered, her hand moving from his shoulder to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. It was an ache. It was the desperate, unspoken need to be seen, to be held, to be wanted for all the broken pieces, not in spite of them. He lifted her, his one good arm taking her weight as if she were nothing. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, burying her face in the warm skin of his neck. He carried her from the library, up the stairs, and into his room. He laid her on the bed, on the dark, silk sheets. The moonlight streamed in, painting them both in silver and shadow. He did not rush. He undressed her slowly, his eyes a dark, burning fire, watching her face with every button, every zipper. His touch was a question. Her stillness was an answer. He undressed himself, his movements economical, his eyes never leaving hers. It was all hard lines and old scars, a dangerous, beautiful work of violent art. He lay beside her, propped on his good elbow, his hand tracing the line of her hip. "Lena," he breathed, his voice rough. "Tell me to stop." "Don't you dare," she whispered, her voice fierce. It was not a taking. It was a worship. It was a slow, deliberate, aching build. His mouth was on hers, his hand in her hair, his body a solid, warm weight against her. He whispered her name like a prayer against her skin, and she whispered his like an acceptance. It was tender. It was desperate. It was the complete, total, and terrifying surrender of two people who had never surrendered to anyone. It was a promise made in the dark, a joining of two profound lonelinesses, and in that moment, in the safety of his arms, she was not afraid. She woke up happy. The feeling was so alien, so terrifying. She lay still for a long time, just absorbing it. The sun was streaming in. Dante was asleep beside her, his face unguarded, the hard lines softened. He looked younger. He was, she realized, just a man. The happiness was a bright, warm light in her chest, and then the fear flooded in, cold and sharp, extinguishing it. She was in Dante Morelli's bed. She had made love to a man who had put Nate in a coma, a man who had people killed, and she had, in that moment, been happier than she had ever been in her life. That was the true prison. He woke. His eyes found hers, and he smiled. A real, unguarded smile that lit his entire face. He reached for her. The phone rang. The smile vanished. The boss was back. He rolled, snatched the phone from the nightstand. "What?" Lena watched the transformation. His face went from sleep-soft to granite. His eyes, fixed on the wall, turned to ice. "Who?" he said. The word a blade. He listened. "Find him. Burn it all down. I want his head." He hung up. "Dante?" she asked, pulling the sheet to her chin. "What's wrong?" He turned to her, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury she had never seen directed at her. "There was a leak. From my inner circle. Markov's old crew. They're not just a rival. They're working with someone inside." "What kind of leak?" His gaze was devastating. "They put your name on a hit list. Lena, your face, your apartment, your name. They're not trying to get to me through you anymore. They're just trying to erase you." Her blood ran cold. "They're sending a hitman. They're sending everyone," he said, his voice raw. He was out of bed, pulling on his trousers, his movements jerky, his wounded shoulder forgotten. "I have to go dark. I have to clean my house, and I have to get you out of here." He was not Dante. Her lover, he was Morelli, the boss. He made a call. "Get the car. Relocate the asset. Protocol Omega." "Dante, no," she pleaded. "Don't do this. Don't shut me out. It's the only way to keep you alive," and he said, his back to her. He was pulling a black shirt over his head. He was a shadow again. "You'll be moved. You'll be safe. You will not leave the location. You will not talk to anyone. Do you understand me?" It was not a request. It was the same command he had given his men. Within 10 minutes, she was dressed, being hurried down a back staircase by 2 of his suited men, not the one who had saved her. These were new. Their faces were hard. Dante met her at the door. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight, his eyes blazing. "You will stay alive. Lena, you will do exactly as they say." He did not kiss her. He did not touch her tenderly. He was gone. They put her in a new black SUV and drove for an hour to a sterile, high-rise apartment she had never seen, in a part of the city she did not recognize. It was all glass and white walls. It had no piano, no scars, no history. It was a cage. 2 guards stood outside her door. She was alone for 2 days. 2 days of silence, of staring at the blank walls, of watching the news, which reported nothing. He had gone dark. He had vanished. She was a prisoner again. This was worse than Jonah, worse than Kyle. This was the man who held her heart, and he had locked her away. Shipan_IC_Ked. The happiness she had felt was a lie. The tenderness was a tactic. He was just like them. He was controlling her, and she had let him. She had to get out. She grabbed her purse, the one thing they had let her keep, and walked to the front door. She pulled it open. The guard, a large man she did not recognize, stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, you can't leave." "Get out of my way," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Mr. Morelli's orders. You stay in the room." "I am not his property," she yelled, shoving at his chest. He grabbed her arm. He grabbed her hard. His fingers, thick and strong, dug into her skin, stopping her. "I said stop." The touch, the roughness, the absolute, impersonal control. It broke her. She was back in the alley. She was back in Jonah's van. "No!" she screamed, fighting him, tears of rage and terror blurring her vision. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged. The doors slid open. Dante stepped out. He had not slept in days. He was in the same black clothes, his face gaunt, a dark, dangerous exhaustion rolling off him. He saw the guard. He saw his hand, his rough grip, on Lena's arm. Dante did not speak. He did not yell. He crossed the hallway in 2 long, silent strides. The guard saw him, his eyes widening in terror. "Boss, she was—" Dante's left fist connected with the guard's jaw. It was a single, brutal, devastating punch. The man's head snapped back, and he crumpled, unconscious, to the carpet. Dante stood over the man, his chest heaving, his body shaking with a rage that was terrifying to behold. He turned to Lena. He saw her face, white with terror, her arm, where the guard had held her. And he saw her eyes, filled with the same fear she had shown him in the warehouse. His face crumpled, the rage vanished, replaced by a devastating, profound horror. He had lost her. In his attempt to keep her safe, he had become the monster she always feared he was. "Lena," he breathed, his hands raised, as if approaching a frightened animal. I'm sorry." He'd lost her trust. He saw it. He had locked her up and set a dog to guard her. I was protecting you," he whispered, his voice broken. And I made you a prisoner, again." She was crying, the tears streaming down her face, but the fear was gone, replaced by a sudden, sharp clarity. "I'm not scared," she whispered, her voice shaking. Dante looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm not scared of you, Dante," she said, taking a step toward him, her hand trembling as she touched the dark stubble on his cheek. "I'm not scared of him, or the hit list." She looked at him, her eyes holding his, forcing him to see the truth. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice cracking, "of how much I want to stay." Dante did not move. He stood in the hallway of the sterile, white apartment, a fallen guard at his feet, and looked at Lena as if he was seeing a ghost. His entire world, the one he controlled with iron-fisted, brutal precision, had just been summed up by the one person he could not control. "You're scared to stay," he repeated, his voice a raw whisper. He looked at his hands, the ones that had just knocked a man unconscious, as if they were foreign objects. "Yes," Lena said, and the single word was a confession that held more weight than all her previous denials. He had won. He had broken her fear of the outside world by replacing it with a need for him. But he had lost. The look in his eyes was one of profound, utter defeat. He had become the man he had protected her from. Lena took a deliberate step over the unconscious guard, closing the distance between them. She did not go back to her room. She did not run. She walked out of the prison. She took a cab back to the mansion. She did not know if her key would still work. She did not know if she was walking into a cage or a home. She only knew she was done being moved. She found him in the library, the room where he had played the piano, where he had shown her the picture of his sister. He was standing by the window, his wounded shoulder slumped, his good hand gripping a glass of something dark. The house was in a state of quiet, controlled chaos. Men in suits moved through the halls with boxes, their voices low and urgent. He was cleaning his house, just as he had promised. He heard her enter and turned, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a deeper, more primal fear. He had been terrified of losing her to an assassin. He had not been prepared to lose her to himself. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice flat. "It's not safe." "Nowhere is safe, Dante," she said, walking to the center of the room. She stood where he had held her, where they had danced to no music. "That's what you taught me. The bus breaks down, the gallery gets attacked, the nice guy from the dating app puts a gun to your head. You think that high-rise was safe? It was the most dangerous place in the world. Because I wasn't me. There. I was just yours." "Lena," he started, his voice breaking. She held up a hand. "I'm not finished. I've been running my whole life. I ran from my hometown. I ran from Kyle. I ran to Raventon. When you showed up, I ran from you, and when you held me, I ran from that, too. I'm done running." She took a step closer. He looked like a man bracing for a bullet. "I love you," she said. The words hung in the air, simple, sharp, and terrifying. "And I hate it. I hate that I love a man who has blood on his hands. I hate that I feel safer with you than I have with any good man. And I hate that you thought locking me in a tower was the only way to keep me." She was standing in front of him now, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "So this is the choice, not yours, mine. If I stay, it's my choice. If I love you, it's not because I'm afraid, it's because I've seen the monster, Dante, and I'm still here." He stared at her, his dark eyes searching hers, looking for the trap, for the lie. He found neither. He found only her, raw and absolute. He, a man who had never yielded, who had taken his father's legacy by force, who had bent a city to his will, finally surrendered. He reached into his pocket. He did not pull out a gun or a phone. He pulled out a single, heavy, old-fashioned brass key, not a key card, a key, the one to the front gate, the one that, she now realized, he had used to enter her apartment. He had a key to her life from the very beginning. He pressed it into her palm. His hand was warm, his skin calloused. "This," he said, his voice thick, "is not a cage. It is a home, if you want it, but it will always be dangerous. I will always be me." He curled her fingers around the key. "You can stay, or you can walk out that door, and I will have my men drive you to any city, any country. You will have enough money to never have to sketch for a client again, and I will never, ever look for you. The choice is yours, Lena, truly." He let go of her hand and walked away. He did not go to his study. He did not make a call. He walked past her, out of the library, and left her alone with the choice. She looked at the key in her hand. It was a promise. It was a burden. She closed her hand around it, the metal biting into her skin, and she stayed. She did not stay in the guest room. She moved into his. She did not hide from his men. She learned their names, or at least the names they gave. The house was a fortress, and she was no longer its prisoner. She was its something else. Dante was a ghost for the next 2 days. He was buried in his study, tearing his organization apart to find the traitor. The house was tense. the air electric with unspoken violence. Lena, restless, found herself at his desk, in the study, while he was in a meeting. She was not snooping, she was just there. His computer was locked. His papers were in neat, coded stacks, but a small, leather-bound notebook was open by his keyboard. It was a log, names, dates, transfer amounts. It meant nothing to her, until she saw a symbol, a small, stylized phoenix, sketched in the margin next to a date. It was the logo she had designed, just last month, for a new shipping and logistics company, a company that Jonah had in his profile, mentioned he did odd jobs for. The traitor, the former associate, it was not just a leak, it was a coordinated, internal attack. She flipped the page, a new entry, in Dante's precise, angry script. Phoenix, the docks, midnight, 10, tonight, midnight, 10 million, 10 men. The docks, it was an ambush, and he was walking into it. She heard his voice in the hall. He was coming. She did not run. She did not hide the book. He entered the study, his face dark with exhaustion. He stopped when he saw her at his desk, holding the book. "Lena," he said, his voice a low warning. "Get away from there. You're walking into a trap," she said, her voice shaking. "The Phoenix. It was Jonah's company. I designed the logo. It's him, isn't it? The traitor. The one you've been looking for." His face went white. He had been played, beautifully, and by his own hand. "How? It doesn't matter. They're waiting for you. You can't go. It's a final ambush. I have to go," he said, his voice flat, his eyes dead. "If I don't, I'm not just a man. I'm a coward. I lose everything. My name, my honor." "You'll lose your life," she shouted. "Get to the panic room," he ordered, walking to his desk and opening a drawer. He pulled out a sleek, black handgun. "Now, Lena, my men will—" "No." He stopped, the gun in his hand. "What did you say?" "I said no," she said, walking to him, planting her feet. "I'm not hiding in a closet while you go get yourself killed. I am not Kiara. I am not your weakness. Dante, I am not the thing you hide. You told me it was my choice. And I am choosing to stay by your side. That is the one choice you do not have," he growled, grabbing her arm. "You will be safe." "You think this is about safety?" she cried, ripping her arm from his grasp. "This is about us. You go, I go, or you find another way. You don't walk in blind, you don't walk in at all. They're attacking your name, your honor, then let them come here, to your home." He stared at her, a wild, dangerous idea dawning in his eyes. Here, she said, her voice firm. "In your fortress, on your terms. Let them come to you, but you are not leaving me." The storm broke at 3 a.m. There was no warning, no negotiation. One moment the house was silent, the next, the world exploded. An explosion at the main gate, a concussion that rattled the stone walls. The house's security system blared, a piercing, deafening shriek. Dante was already moving. He was in his element. He was dressed in black, a tactical vest strapped to his chest, the gun in his hand. He was not her lover. He was the king, and his castle was under siege. "Get her to the safe room," he yelled to his men. "No!" Lena screamed, grabbing his arm. "Lena, so help me God!" "The staff," she yelled, pointing to the hallway where his elderly cook and 2 young housekeepers were huddled, crying. "Get them to the safe room. I'm staying with you." He looked at her, his eyes blazing. He saw her choice. He saw her. "Fine," he barked. He shoved a small, silver handgun into her hand. "You know how to use this?" "I'll figure it out," she said, her hand shaking. "Point, pull, don't think," he said. He dragged her with him, down the hall toward the library. "Stay behind me." The house was a war zone. Gunfire echoed from the foyer, the sound of glass shattering, of men shouting. Dante's men were professionals, and they were defending their home. Dante pushed Lena into the library, his safe room, the one he had played piano in. "Barricade the door. Do not, under any circumstances, open it. I will come for you." "Dante, I will come for you," he roared. He kissed her. A hard, fast, brutal kiss that tasted of gunpowder and fear. "I love you. Now, live." He was gone. She was alone. She could hear the fight, moving closer. She was not a fighter. She was not a killer. She was She was just Lena. She looked at the gun in her hand. She thought about Nate. She thought about Jonah. She thought about the man who had just screamed that he loved her. She heard a crash. Not from the hall. From the window, a man in black, one of the rival crew, was smashing the thick glass of the library window. He was coming in. Lena did not hide. She did not scream. She raised the gun, just as she had seen in the movies, both hands trembling so hard she could barely aim. He was inside. He saw her. He raised his own gun. She pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. The kickback slammed her shoulder, knocking her backward. The man just stopped. He looked down at the red, spreading stain on his chest, then at her. His expression one of pure, blank surprise. He crumpled. She had done it. She heard Dante's voice, a roar of pain from the hall. No! She ran. She ripped the library door open. The hallway was a scene from hell. 2 of Dante's men were down, 3 of the rivals, and Dante, he was on his knees, his bad shoulder bleeding again. The traitor, the phoenix, the man from the notebook was standing over him, his gun pressed to Dante's head. "It's over, Morelli," the traitor sneered. "Your house, your name, your everything. It's mine." Dante looked up, and his eyes found Lena, standing in the doorway. His face was not one of fear. It was one of pure, agonizing apology. He had failed her. "No," Lena whispered. The traitor turned, hearing her. He smiled. "Oh, the girlfriend. Perfect. You get to watch." He turned the gun back to Dante. Lena raised her arm. Her hand was steady. She was not shaking. She was not afraid. She was furious. She pointed. She pulled the trigger. The traitor's head snapped back. He fell, his gun clattering on the marble floor. Silence. The house was completely, totally silent. Lena walked, her bare feet sticking to the floor, through the smoke and the dust. She did not look at the man she had shot. She only looked at Dante. He was staring at her, his face a mask of blood, sweat, and pure, unfiltered awe. She dropped the gun. She fell to her knees in front of him, her hands trembling again, framing his face. Are you... I'm alive," he breathed. He pulled her to him, his good arm wrapping around her, crushing her, burying his face in her hair. You saved me." She held him, her small body shielding his, and as his men began to swarm, to secure the house, to call the cleaners, she did not let go. She held him, refusing to let him fall. Days later, the gallery was almost back to normal. The window was replaced. The art was re-hung. Mr. Reese had told her, with a new, profound respect, that the space was hers, for as long as she wanted it. The press, a small TV in the office, was buzzing. The Morelli name, a staple of Raventon's underworld, had vanished. The police reported a gang-related conflict that had, seemingly, wiped out 2 entire organizations. The king was dead. Lena was hanging her last sketch, the charcoal portrait of the old man from the coffee shop, the first one he had seen. The bell on the gallery door chimed. She turned. He was standing in the doorway, bathed in the afternoon light. He was not the king. He was not the boss. He was in a simple, perfectly cut blue suit. He was clean-shaven. He looked normal. He smiled. A slow, easy smile she had only seen once, in the morning light in his bed. "Lena Carver," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble. "I was told this is where one finds the best new art." She could not speak. She just watched him walk toward her. His eyes, those same piercing, dark eyes, never leaving hers. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the sketch, then at her. "Every man you date disappeared," he said, his voice soft, a shared secret. "But I'm still here." She did not wait. She did not hesitate. She was not running. Lena walked into his arms. She rose on her toes, her hands finding his face, and she kissed him. It was not a kiss of fear, or passion, or desperation. It was a kiss of certainty. It was a kiss of coming home. He held her, his hands on her waist, his forehead resting against hers. "You're mine, too," she whispered, as the door closed behind them. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed the journey with Lena and Dante. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please drop a comment and let us know. Your support means everything to us. If you loved this story, please subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more, and share your thoughts on this part in English. We read every single one.